thank you for the opportunity to be here. Really quite an honor. Really excited to share a little bit more about what's been going on at Union Square Hospitality Group, and also really excited to learn from all of you. Before kind of digging into the content, wanted to share a little bit about my background because I think it's connected to what we will be discussing today. So I've been with Union Square Hospitality Group now for 3 years. I just celebrated my 3-year anniversary last week. And prior to that, I was in professional services for about 15 years. 10 of those years, I was with a company called Great Place to Work. And Great Place to Work is a research and consulting firm that publishes the 100 best companies to work for list. Are you guys familiar with that list? And so as a consultant, my primary responsibility was to study what was going on in these great companies and these great cultures and to translate those understandings into insights for my clients. And so in the 10 years that I was there, I progressed professionally and was leading our US business by the time that I left, and I maintained a small portfolio of clients to stay fresh and to continue to walk, excuse me, in the shoes of our people. And one of my clients was Union Square Hospitality Group, and it was Danny. And so I was working as an outside consultant with Danny for about a year. And then Danny and I started to have some conversations because I wasn't really looking. Danny wasn't really thinking about having a position of a chief culture officer. But after a year of working together, we thought, maybe we could make something work. And so for about 6 months, we kind of discussed what would the opportunity look like, what would the role entail, what would I be doing. And of course, I fell in love with USHG throughout that entire process, and I thought, wow, what an honor this would be to join the company. And we were close to finalizing all of the details, and I woke up in the middle of the night, and I thought, holy shit, this is a terrible idea. And so the next morning, I called Danny, and I said, Danny, I have such tremendous respect for you. You are one of the most brilliant professionals that I've ever had the honor to come in contact with. And I trust your judgment. You're obviously incredibly bright and talented. I think this is one of the worst decisions that you could make. And so I just want to let you know that I don't think this is a good idea. And he looked at me and he said, well, why not? And I said, I am the leader of a company right now where I have done everyone's job. And the only way that I know how to serve a population of people is having walked in everyone's shoes. And I've never spent one day of my professional life in the hospitality industry. And he knew that throughout the process. I said, but I don't know how to lead from that lens because I don't know what our people are experiencing, and I don't know how to serve a population like that. And he said, well, that's actually one of the reasons why I would like for you to join our company is because you do have an outside perspective, because you don't know how things should work in the industry, and you can ask some of those questions, and you can push our thinking outside of the industry. And Danny is a very convincing and persuasive person, so after this conversation, I did decide to join USHG, obviously. But I share that story with you because I've never walked in your shoes. And I just want to own that and honor that. And I've never walked in the shoes of our employees as well. And I'm a complete newbie to the industry with only 3 years under my belt. And I finally feel like I know what I don't know. I spent the first 3 years not even knowing what I didn't know about our industry, and now I feel like I'm at the spot where I know what I don't know, and I look forward to the journey ahead of me to learn what I need to know. So, as Sonia mentioned, we're going to spend half of our time in Q&A really digging into the questions that you guys are most curious about, but we'll spend the first portion providing an overview of what we've been experiencing for the situation that we've been facing in New York and with USHG. Then I will offer up a bold and pretty provocative proposition, and then we'll get into hospitality included and the why and the what and how's it going, and then we'll move into Q&A. So situation analysis. mentioned that being completely new to the industry, I needed to start to understand what was going on. And when I joined, I was shocked to realize the massive culinary talent shortage that we were experiencing. I had always viewed USHG as being an employer of choice and a preferred employer and a company that had a really great reputation. And I thought, how is it possible that we have such a massive shortage of talent in our culinary positions? And then learned that we were facing it in New York City and industry-wide. And really what we're looking at is that there's an issue of supply and demand, particularly when it comes to line cooks, is what we've been experiencing. So there are many, many more line cook positions than there are talented line cooks available to apply to these positions. The other thing that we've been experiencing, and again, I've never worked in a kitchen, but from our colleagues in the kitchens, they're telling me, sharing the experience that when people join the team, that they have unrealistic expectations about what they will be experiencing with respect to what they will be doing on a day-to-day basis and how fast they can progress. And the underlying belief is that this has been influenced by the sexiness factor of what we've been seeing on TV. And so those expectations are incredibly high. You know, we joke with saying that new team members think go from a prep cook to executive chef in 3 months. And obviously that's not the case, but managing a limited talent pool with those elevated and unrealistic expectations is something we've been faced with. Regulatory constraints. I was shocked when I learned about this 80-20 rule. I had no idea that that existed. And it seemed kind of bizarre to me because it really handcuffs operators and leaders, because people are one of the most valuable assets in a company, and the inability to kind of deploy people in the most effective or efficient way seemed like it didn't really make a ton of sense. Then when you think about all of the Department of Labor standards and exempt and not exempt and how work gets done in restaurants, all of these constraints are really preventing us from running our businesses as efficiently and effectively and profitably as we would want to. And then there are the predatory law firms, and I think there was a breakout session that started to dig into those questions just now. But in our experience, obviously, we want to do the right thing. We want to be fully compliant. We want to take the best care of our people. But all of the regulations that we experience on the local level, on the state level, on the federal level, that really tie our hands in terms of running our businesses, those predatory law firms are finding the smallest infraction and opening it up and making it a really, really big issue. Then we have the government-mandated compensation changes. So in New York, and I believe you have something on the ballot next week here in Colorado, in New York we are on a plan to get to $15 an hour for minimum wage. And we still have a two-tiered system with a tipped minimum wage, which is also increasing at the same level with regular minimum wage. Then we look at the Department of Labor mandate for exempt employees to get to 48 something as the commitment for the annualized salary. And both of those things together, when we're looking at our payroll expenses, astronomical. For us, we've been experiencing some crazy, insane rents, and more recently, in the past couple of years, the spike has been dramatic. In fact, as many of you probably know, our flagship restaurant, the restaurant that Danny started 31 years ago, Union Square Cafe, which has really represented an institution in the neighborhood, an institution for Manhattan, and an institution really for our industry, we had to move to a different location because we could no longer afford the rent that our landlord was saying that we needed to pay. So when you've got increasing rents, and we've been experiencing increased food costs, well, then we're elevating the menu prices. When we're elevating the menu prices, and over the past couple of years, the percentage of tipping from 15 to 18 to 20 is increasing. What you see is this growing disparity between front of house compensation and back of house compensation. So when Danny started Union Square Cafe, there was a lot more parity between front of house and back of house. Now, on average, we're seeing about a 3-to-1 ratio for our hourly employees. In New York, we've also been seeing explosive competition. So it used to be that people would come to Manhattan to work in our industry and really kind of get the pedigree to have an exceptional career. And lots of times they were commuting from all of the other boroughs in order to get into Manhattan. What we're experiencing is the explosive growth of restaurants across all of the 5 boroughs. And what that means is people can live a lot more reasonably in their borough and not have to spend the time or the money getting into New York. So why would you go into Manhattan for a job when you could work around the corner, make the same or maybe even more money, live more reasonably, and still have a very, very professional career? And the point around career advancement requiring, in some cases, a pay decrease was also shocking to me. Again, as a newcomer to the industry, I said, how can we say that we want people to grow their careers with us and ask them to take a pay cut when they're getting advanced? So, speaking specifically of front of house with the tips that people receive, when you are an experienced server and you're working those Friday night and Saturday night shifts consistently, your earnings are pretty high. And then if we're promoting you, and I use that word in air quotes, when we're promoting you to management, we're asking you to take a pretty hefty pay cut for more work, oftentimes more hours, and a lot more responsibility. That didn't really feel really fair either. Same things when we were promoting people internally to go from server assistant to a server. We were asking people to take minimum wage for the time that they were trailing, which is obviously very different than what they would have been receiving with tips. So these kinds of things were really shocking for me as the newcomer into the industry, and this was what we were faced with. And I've been described as a manic optimist. I genuinely believe that we can do whatever we put our minds to if we've got the right people and the right energy at the table. And this was kind of what I was thinking we were seeing, which is the perfect storm. Doom and gloom. I promise it'll end on a happy note. But this is really what we were faced with. So I share all of this background to explain the bold proposition that I'm about to make. And I hope after I share this, you'll understand why. Restaurants that do not have great cultures will not survive into the future, period. You might be thinking, you know, lady, you spent 15 years in consulting in cultures and you are a chief culture officer. It provides you some awesome job security to make this bold statement. Yes, probably. But I hope if after what I share with you, you'll also believe that this bold proposition is accurate and true. So just going back to the need to hire great people. We need amazing people in our kitchens with culinary expertise and passion. We need hospitalitarians. We need amazing managers. What do we need? We need awesome people. And there are very few people out there to be had right now. So what is it? It's a war for talent. In most cases, in a supply and demand issue in an economy and a war for talent, you can solve that equation with one very simple transaction: cash. Throw cash at the problem in any supply and demand issue, typically you start to balance the scales. But as we know, the economics really don't make sense when we just throw cash at the problem. But even if we had the cash to throw at the problem, even if the economics made sense, it's not making sense for people to think through just cash or compensation being the one thing that will determine whether or not they're going to join your restaurant or your company. Does anyone know what the #1 factor is for graduates to accept a new position anywhere that they're considering? Benefits, I heard? Culture, yay! Others? Knowing someone? Yep. Relationships? Flexibility in the workplace? Room for advancement. Yep. This was a survey that they did, and they asked people, why will you choose to accept a position? And people wrote, the graduates wrote, meaningful and purpose-driven work, which kind of gets to a lot of what you guys were just sharing, but it's very different than this equation. Cash, right? You can touch cash, you can count it, you know what it is. How are we supposed to deliver on meaningful and purpose-driven work? It's a lot more ethereal and a lot more challenging. So let's talk a little bit about the millennial generation for a second, because I've heard lots of comments that people are criticizing the millennial generation, saying, oh, those crazy kids that live in their parents' basement and have all of these unrealistic expectations about what they should be doing for their work and how much money they should be making. Yes, there are some of those stereotypes that certainly do apply. But this generation represents half of our world. Half of our world. Given the global expansive population, half of our world is in this millennial generation. And guess what? They're not only our prospective employees, most of them are probably our current employees, but this is the candidate pool that we are searching through. They're also our guests, and they vote with their wallet. So we need to understand what this generation cares about if we want to hire from this generation and if we want to serve this generation, if we want them to be coming into our businesses. So the competitive advantage is culture. Yes, job security, but we talk about culture at USHG with a very simple definition of how we do things around here, which goes to a lot of what you were saying in terms of what matters to people when they accept a position. And the way that we want to be doing things at USHG is a way where our people have uplifting and positive experiences. We realize this is incredibly aspirational, but we want people to go home feeling more enriched, more nourished, and more positive after their day of work than when they arrived at work. So, to share more about our approach to this, want to make it very clear that we are in absolutely no way a perfect organization. We have lots of, we say that we're opportunity rich. We have lots of things that we are working on. We're on our own journey to continue to get better. But there are a couple of things that we're really proud of that we want to share with you that help to explain how we do things around here at USHG. And the first is our philosophy of Enlightened Hospitality. For those of you that read Setting the Table, Danny's book, you know that this is something that he talks a lot about. And it is the prioritization of our stakeholders, starting first with taking care of each other. And we take care of each other for the purpose of then being able to take care of our guests. When we're taking care of our guests, we can take better care of our suppliers. When we're taking awesome care of our suppliers, we're able to take great care of our communities. Ultimately, in doing all of those things, we're able to have strong, profitable, healthy businesses, paying back our investors, and then able to take the profits from our businesses to put back into taking care of each other. That's why it's a virtuous cycle that we believe in. We had a challenge, though, because Setting the Table tells lots of really rich and beautiful and amazing stories of our culture. And we found that those stories and our perceived culture was being used against us a little bit, with something like, I'm not getting the shift I want, you're not taking care of me, kind of situation. So, or, you know, you're not promoting me, you're not on my side, those kinds of things. So we said, okay, we need to clarify what it means to be part of this culture. And so we embarked on a journey to name our family values. We call them our family values. They are integrity, excellence, entrepreneurial spirit, and hospitality. And within each one of these values, we have 3 behavioral expectations. And all of those behavioral expectations start with the word I. Danny writes about it in his book. We talk a lot about it at USHG, hospitality being a team sport. It's pretty rare in our culture, in our company, that we use the word I. Because even if an individual did it, they're typically not going to say, I did that, because we're also pretty humble too. So We intentionally started each one of these statements with the word I, and then a very active verb, because we wanted culture to be a shared commitment, and we wanted everyone to own their responsibility to contributing positively to the culture. So if the philosophy of the virtuous cycle of enlightened hospitality helps us prioritize our stakeholders, our family values and the behavioral expectations help us understand what each individual's role is in bringing to life that virtuous cycle of enlightened hospitality, and to contradict a little bit of the sense of entitlement that we were starting to experience with some of our staff members. So, in the consulting industry, I had the opportunity to, you guys are giggling at this picture, I had the opportunity to be inside of probably 100+ companies. Most companies have values, and most of them are stuck on posters on the wall. But the true test, we believe, is when your values are put into action. So, this picture, I don't know if everyone can see all of the details here. So this is Danny. This is in our conference room. And yes, he's looking pretty pissed off because I'm taking this picture. And behind him are our 4 family values, and you can see underneath the behavioral expectations. So why am I sharing this picture? Well, when I first started, Danny and I had the conversation about what my goals were going to be, and it was all based on that situation analysis that I shared in the beginning. And one of the things he said, you know, I would love for us to develop a strategy to address all of these issues, but mainly what I am most concerned about is the inequity of front of house and back of house compensation. He said, it doesn't feel fair or right to say that our #1 tenet of enlightened hospitality is taking care of each other, and we continue to see this growing disparity. He said, please work with our team members, our colleagues, to recommend an approach to addressing this. And again, as the rookie, I thought, I got this. I've done compensation plans before. I can figure this out. After a year of analysis and investigation and identifying dozens of alternatives and options that would not work, collaborating very, very closely with our leaders and trying to just really push ourselves to flex that entrepreneurial spirit for, okay, what can we do? After a year-long process, came to the realization that we couldn't address this issue adequately without eliminating tipping. And it was probably one of the lowest points of my professional career when I had to go into that meeting with the executive committee, with Danny, and to say, we analyzed all the options, and the only way we can do this is if we eliminate tipping. I'm sorry. And this is the moment when Danny said, well, then that's what we're going to do. And I thought, another holy shit moment. And I snapped this picture, and I'm getting goosebumps even telling the story, because I knew in that moment that our company would forever be changed, and the New York would forever be changed, and hopefully our industry would forever be changed. But I also felt really proud because it was quite literally our family values in action. Danny said, we can't look at this wall and say integrity matters and not have the courage to do the right thing. And I have faith that we will find a way to make sure that we can do this successfully with our family values and with prioritizing the tenets of enlightened hospitality in the appropriate order. So that was the moment, and this was June of last year, that Danny named that we were going to eliminate tipping and embark on hospitality included. So I want to share a little bit more about why hospitality included. And I have a video because it does a much better job of synthesizing and explaining why we did this than I ever could.
Let's take a brief look at the history of tipping in the US. We have to go back to the 17th century, when British aristocrats began tipping to ensure promptitude. Rich Americans who vacationed in Europe brought the practice back to the US after the Civil War. Back in America, tipping was received with ambivalence. Throughout the 1800s, there were many anti-tipping movements, all of which failed. However, during the Prohibition movement in the early 1900s, hotels and restaurants lost revenue from the sale of alcohol. This resulted in the welcoming of tips to supplement those lower employee wages. Tipping wasn't originally needed to compensate low wages, but today over 4 million people make their living primarily on tips. So how did tipping go from a little extra to a primary source of income? In 1966, the Fair Labor Standards Act was amended with a sub-minimum wage for workers who received tips. This meant that employees could shift the responsibility of paying the full legal minimum wage to their customers through the practice of tipping. Since 1966, the gap between regular minimum wage and tipped minimum wage has risen significantly. What started out as a simple gesture to reward excellent service has become a complicated process full of governed rules and regulations. On top of that, recent studies have shown that customers' tipping behavior isn't always linked to the quality of service they receive. So why are we tipping? And where are our tips going?
So this is part one of a three-part video series. We'll take a closer look at the economics of tipping.
Let's take a closer look at the economics of tipping. To begin with, we need to look at how and why people tip. Studies have shown that service, good or bad, does not affect the tip amount. Most guests tip based on a percentage of the overall price of their meal. Therefore, we need to take a closer look at what influences the price of a meal. This delicious free-range chicken and accompanying vegetables started out on a farm. They were transported to a restaurant and skillfully prepared by a professional team, including the line cook Thomas. A server, like Maya, delivers the meal to a guest as part of a complete dining experience. After the meal, the guest pays the bill and adds on a tip. The bill is spread between all the costs needed to run a successful restaurant. The tip is then shared between the service staff, including Maya. However, due to regulations, some of the same hands that helped prepare that meal do not benefit from the tip left by the guest. Sorry, Thomas. The current system sees many passionate culinary people, like Thomas, moving to the service side of the business just to make ends meet. This is leading to a shrinking culinary talent pool, and over time could result in the decline of our industry. So why not just pay Thomas more? If we compensate Thomas as we would like, our menu prices would need to increase, and with the practice of tipping on top of these new prices, our dining experience would be out of the reach for many. However, if we stopped asking our guests to tip, but instead added the average tip into the menu price of the meal, our guests wouldn't be spending any more than they normally would. And we could compensate all of our employees in a way that recognizes the talents and passions of both the culinary and the dining room teams. That's what we call hospitality included.
So ultimately, after the year-long process of the analysis of all of the different options, I came to the conclusion that probably all of you guys already knew, which is every time you give a bump in compensation to back of house, and you need to likely, if you're going to keep your margins the same, you have to increase your menu prices. And in so doing, you automatically give a raise to front of house. And that equation won't change unless you can redo the entire system. So that is ultimately why we embarked on this endeavor. What is hospitality included? The next video goes into the details a little bit of the program and what is included in hospitality.
How does hospitality included allow us to invest in the future of the hospitality industry? To begin with, at USHG, we believe hospitality is a team sport. It takes all of us working together to create memorable moments for our guests. At USHG, we are all passionate about our profession and intrinsically strive to do the right thing. To do what needs to be done as well as it can possibly be done. To see opportunities and create solutions first. And do all we can and more than is expected for others. We believe our people are the future of the hospitality industry, and eliminating tipping in favor of inclusive menu pricing allows us the flexibility to develop and promote all our people based on their individual skills, experience, and achievement, enabling career growth for everyone. This is Hospitality Included. Team members like Maya and Thomas who want to grow financially and professionally will be able to earn those opportunities based on the merit of their work and the consistency with which they demonstrate our family values. Our people grow through traditional promotions, moving from stations and positions, earning more as they take on new roles along with additional skills and responsibility. Within each role, USHGers are compensated as they advance from a contributing member to a more experienced mentor. We also recognize the experts in their roles, whose performances and contributions far surpass expectations. By investing more in our people, our guests will benefit from the highly skilled service they receive from people who are recognized for their abilities. We want to provide an experience that gives our guests no choice but to return, which is the best compliment a guest could ever give us. We believe a future without tipping is a future of enlightened hospitality. As always, we begin by taking care of each other, which better allows us to take care of our guests, community, suppliers, and investors. By taking better care of each other, we are investing in the future of the hospitality industry, and that's a future we believe in.
So it looks like an amazing parallel universe. I'm here to share with you that there are lots of challenges associated with it, and we'll dig into those. That is the utopia that we aspire towards, but we're in it right now, and we'll share those challenges. Starting with what else is included in hospitality, included, just to be really clear, what are those tenets? The first is, and as mentioned in the video, all-inclusive menu pricing. So we didn't add a service fee, we didn't add an admin fee. We re-engineered our menu to be all-inclusive. And that doesn't mean 20-some% for every single dish. It means that we engineered it the same way that we were engineering it before. We also eliminated the tip line. And not only that, but we have educated our team members to ensure that we are politely rejecting any cash left by chance. And we're really proud of the fact that 0.5% of our overall revenue is currently being collected in tips. Even at the coat check, where that traditionally happens, we are still asking our guests, this is a hospitality included restaurant. We're grateful that you appreciated your experience. The best compliment you can share with us is to return again. We increased the back of house compensation ahead of legally mandated compensation changes. So for us in New York, our floor for our porter team was $9 an hour. We went up and started the floor at $11 an hour, and then we shifted all of the other wages for different positions in career progression in the kitchen in order to recognize that you can't obviously have a porter and a line cook earning the same. So we raised all of the wages in our kitchen. We eliminated the tip credit, and we pay our front of house colleagues minimum wage, above minimum wage, between $11 an hour and $15 an hour, which frees us from that crazy 80-20 thing. And in addition to that, our front of house colleagues earn a portion of our revenue. We call it a revenue share program, and it is done on a weekly basis. Why did we choose that path? Well, the first is because our team members told us that they really wanted to participate in the upside of increased sales. So we wanted to maintain that variable component. We also wanted to support people in having more of a balance with their personal life and their professional life. So we went to weekly because we didn't want people to always have to work and chase those Friday night shifts or the Saturday night shifts in order to maximize their compensation. We are connecting compensation with the skill set, with the knowledge, with the experience, and not necessarily the shift that you work. We do expect people to still work on Friday and Saturday nights, obviously, but we also want to be able to plug those team members in on Mondays and Tuesdays and Wednesdays to help to support and build up the skills of the other team members, as well as providing them an opportunity to have a different type of lifestyle if they want that. We also are very transparent about our revenue targets with our team members because we want people to be able to estimate what their income will be and to root and to support in achieving what those sales targets are. So during lineup, we're letting people know, okay, this is our weekly sales goal, here's what our cover count goal is, here's what our average check goal is, and then we're providing daily updates for our team members to track the progress so that they all have a common goal to work towards. We've increased the transparency so far as to say if there are people that are interested in seeing the full P&L, we're going to sit down with them and have that conversation to help them understand the economics behind the business. But we first started with everyone having access to our revenue targets. We also provided clear career progression, as you saw in the video, for all of our employees. What does that actually mean? It means that we have checklists that we have created for all of our positions that name the specific skills, knowledge, and experience that is required to be in a specific role, and we have indicated the commensurate compensation that goes along with being in that role so that people can say, okay, if I get promoted into this role, here's how much I can expect to receive in terms of compensation, and here's what I will be expected to do. We also asked our people then to drive their own career advancement. So if you are interested in getting promoted, you have the checklist, you know what's expected of you. We ask that our people do a self-evaluation to assess how they think that they're doing, and then to have a conversation with the manager for the manager to share their perspective on how that person is doing. Sometimes it's check, 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 you're awesome, yes, you absolutely deserve to be promoted, let's make that happen. Sometimes it's, wow, okay, so this is you've done these 5 things really, really well, great, congratulations, and here are some of the other opportunities that we need to work on. You're not ready for a promotion, and here's the support that we'll give you to help you get there. And then the employee kind of has to wait at least 90 days to re-up because we don't want people coming back the next day saying, I'm ready now. Because it's not time-based, it's skill-based. And we wanted to put that opportunity in the hands of our people to drive their own career growth. We also set the floor of our management teams at $52,000, which is above the federally required 58 number that I was referring to earlier, and we enriched the set of benefits that we offer to our management team members to try to balance the equation a little bit when we are promoting people so that it's not that huge drop-off when they are promoted into management. How's it going? Well, that was utopia. Here's the reality of the situation, which is this has been a massive, massive change management effort. When you start monkeying with people's pay, when you start describing and providing transparency for how people can grow their careers, when you start shifting your menu prices, we are rocking people's worlds, right? We are asking them to look at their work and their guest experience completely differently. And that is a massive change management effort. And we knew that going into this, but it's been really challenging because the amount of conversations that need to happen are enormous. It requires a completely new way of running our businesses. So an example being your 30% food cost now is 20% because your menu prices are so much higher because it's all inclusive. Our P&Ls look completely different. So we had to shift all of our norms. Without the 80-20 rule, we're saying we felt liberated by it. Well, we better start acting like we're liberated by it and start really being efficient with our people and not going into overtime, particularly with the blended overtime of revenue share. So we have to be very careful about how we are staffing. We also, almost overnight, increased the expectations of our management team members because now we're asking our management team members to hold our people accountable to their work in a way that they weren't being asked to do before. In the past, you could have a conversation when someone was interested to be promoted and say, I just don't feel like you're ready. And that was okay. Now we've got this checklist, and that means as a manager, you better damn well know whether or not that person is ready because they're going to hold you accountable to it. So we changed the lives and expectations of our managers. On the financial side, when I went through all of the tenets of hospitality included in terms of the increases in compensation and the benefits, the richer benefits that we were offering. We did not increase our menu prices to the point that we need to in order to maintain our margins. Why? Because we want to have full dining rooms. We didn't want to fire all of our guests in this process. But if you start adding up all of the additional investments that we're making in our people, and you're looking at our menu prices and you're comparing them to 2 years ago, we didn't take the biggest jumps that we really need to in order to maintain our margins. And we're looking at this as a huge investment in our future. We also no longer have the federal tax tip credit, which is a huge hit to us as well. And with the increased fixed wages, that means that that variability isn't there that it used to be when our wages were lower. So lots of financial challenges that we are facing. So what are we learning? The first is trust has been absolutely paramount to lead through this change management effort. It's also incredibly fragile. We all know this, but it can take hundreds and hundreds of tiny little interactions and actions to build someone's trust, and it only takes one to screw it up. And so we thought through that lens to say, okay, how can we approach this in a way where we are perceived as being trustworthy, where our people, when you're changing someone's compensation, our people have to believe that it's in their best interest and that we're not trying to screw them over. Our guests have to believe that we are going to do the right thing with our increased menu prices, because before they had the control of either punishing or rewarding our people, and now we're taking back that control. And that requires a ton of trust. And one of the things that we realized was that in order to get trust, we have to give trust. So a month before we announced externally to the world that we would be eliminating tipping, we made a calculated risk to let all of our 2,000 employees know. And we asked them to keep it confidential, but it was a risk because if one person, one singular person, forwarded that email on to the press or to a friend who could forward it to the press, we would have been barraged with media inquiries without any answers because we hadn't formulated our plan yet. But we knew that we needed to involve our people in creating that plan, and so it was a calculated risk. So we invited them into the conversation. We had a series of town halls. We had focus groups. We had online Q&A that we had. We also had an email site where people could submit their questions more anonymously. We did all of this a month in advance of telling the rest of the world. We knew that we were going to eliminate tipping, but we didn't know exactly how, and we knew that we had to bring our people along with us on this journey. And if we sat in a side room and tried to figure out what it was going to be without their involvement, we were concerned that we wouldn't have honored that first tenet of Enlightened Hospitality and taken care of each other. The flip side of that very involved process was that if you're going to invite people into the process to collaborate, you have to be able to listen and respond to what they're saying. And we had some ideas about how we wanted to craft this, but we had to be open to the fact that if they really felt strongly about something and they were recommending something different than what we had in mind, we had to honor that too, which was also a scary thing for us. But it was that process together of being vulnerable and trusting one another as we went through this process that was a huge lesson learned for us. The best way that we found to continue to maintain the levels of trust is to communicate, communicate, communicate. And we really, I think we almost erred in the beginning on the side of over-communication with everything that we were doing, and I'll go through some examples of what that looked like. Repeatable practices. The over-communication is certainly one of them. There's probably nothing more personal to an employee than their paycheck and how they are being assessed in terms of their skills. So we started out with the messaging of why this is important. The videos explain the why, and you can kind of buy in conceptually and say, okay, I get it, I get it, I get it. But when it comes down to the end of the day, you want to know that you're being taken care of and that your compensation isn't being really monkeyed with. and that you feel good about your ability to progress or to be fairly assessed. And so in addition to all of those communications that I was describing with our town halls and our interactive Q&A forum and submitting questions anonymously, all of the focus groups that we brought together, we also sat down with every single employee who was going through the hospitality included transition several times and for extended periods of time. We went through their historical earnings. We showed them what their new compensation was like. We showed them an old paycheck and a new paycheck. We assessed them in terms of where their skills were. We asked them what their professional aspirations were. And we did that for at least 3 hours during the process, each employee 3 hours during the process of the transition, which is an obscene amount of communication, right? But we wanted to make sure that not only were we helping people understand the big why, but the what's in it for me was being answered as well. We also chose very deliberate and intentional language. Danny is a very big language person and how much words really, really matter. An example being for us when we were shifting away from tipping and the points and the tip pool to a revenue share program, our first draft of this included point allocations for the revenue share. And then we said, well, wait a second, if we're saying points, people are probably going to be still thinking about the tipping mechanism. So instead of using that as an explanation, we call them shares. So you get number of shares in the revenue share pool. Transparency and sharing of data. One of the best things that helped us to maintain the levels of trust throughout this process was opening up our books and opening up our career progression. And once we were able to show people that there was no secret behind this, they really started to believe in that. And that is one of the key components for the meaningful and purpose-driven work, is when people can understand that there's a level playing field and when they don't think that people are taking advantage of them. And that transparency really has helped our people believe in that. Things to avoid. This list is way longer than the 3 that I will share here, and I'm happy to share some more war stories with you if you're interested. The first is the cheerleader syndrome. So you saw the first 2 videos, and it's easy to kind of get inspired and say, oh, this is awesome, this is utopia, and we're gonna go there, and we're changing the industry. And we started off with our first pilot, The Modern, which actually launched, we're coming up on the 1-year anniversary of it launching at The Modern. And in lineups and in all of the team meetings at The Modern, we were describing this utopia, and what we failed to do was to explain this is going to really suck for a while. Because the reality is, yes, that's where we're going, but the change process is very painful. And we didn't name that as deliberately and intentionally as we could and should have, and it gave us a major leadership credibility ding because they thought we were out of touch with reality. And so with the following rollouts, we named, yes, utopia, yes, this is where we're going, and it's going to really suck in the meantime, so brace yourselves. And that helped to kind of calibrate the expectations that people had. Second big learning was convincing versus educating. So we were uber focused on our retention numbers, because if we're saying that we want to take better care of our people, we're doing this for our people. If our people all leave, well, we have not made their lives better, right? So we wanted to try to do everything that we could to keep our people. And when we first started, we had this air of convincing people that this is the right thing to do, and if it started to feel a little even political. Our people are amazing with sharing feedback, and so they told us it's feeling a little too political in terms of this being the right thing to do. And as leaders, shouldering the responsibility of convincing people, that's a really tough thing to put on your shoulders. It's also really disempowering for people, because when you're trying to overly convince people, you're forgetting that of course they have options. You can talk to them as much as you want to, but they know that they have options. And when you aren't naming those options, it's almost a backhanded way of not showing respect for people. And so our first attempt at this was, yes, this is the right thing, we're all fired up, let's do this together, convincing people that this is the right thing. And then we shifted that to education. We changed the rules of the game on people. They joined one company, one compensation system, one approach, and overnight we changed it. And we have to honor the fact that people may not want that. Yes, it is the right thing for us. It may not be the right thing for that individual. And so we changed our approach to say, we changed the rules of the game. Here's what the new game rules look like. And we know that this may not work for all of you. And that's okay. And if you think that this doesn't work for you and you no longer want to work for our company, raise your hand and we will do everything we can to find you a job elsewhere. And that was a really liberating thing, both from a leadership perspective, but then also naming it with our people. And then we didn't get ourselves into these Gumby situations of trying to hold on to everyone, even when the expectations weren't realistic. And in many cases, the people that left were the ones that were skunking up the place anyway. So in some cases, it was actually a good thing for our culture. The last one was moving too quickly without methodical planning. So when we first announced that we were going to roll out Hospitality Included in all 13 of our New York locations, we had the goal of doing that by the end of the year. We've rolled 4 onto Hospitality Included, and we are in November. We will have our 5th when Union Square Cafe reopens with Hospitality Included, but we're not even halfway through. We had a really beautiful timeline and project plan that we were going to implement. And what we realized after the Modern was we needed to pump the brakes. The challenge is that we had communicated our timeline with a tiny little asterisk that said, we may need to slide some of these timelines if we learn something that needs to mean that we have to reevaluate this plan. But people had in their head, this is the date that this is going to happen, this is the date that this is going to happen. And they had those expectations. And when we pumped the brakes, people thought, uh-oh, maybe this isn't the right thing. Maybe they're backing away from this. Maybe it's not working as well. And so kind of under-promising and over-delivering was one of our huge lessons learned, because we lost a lot of trust and a lot of faith in communicating that timeline in the spirit of transparency, wanting everyone to understand what was going on. We actually shot ourselves in the foot because we didn't deliver on that timeline. And we have lots of really good reasons why. And the primary reason why is because even though for those of us that have been leading this process, implementing our 5th, it's kind of an old game for us at this point. Everyone who is going through this process in the next restaurant, it's their first time through this. And we can't back away from the intensity of the communications, because that's what made it work in those businesses. And we can't assume that the information has flowed through to our other colleagues in the other restaurants. We have to make sure that we are communicating with each and every employee throughout this process with the same level of care and concern and respect as we did with the first businesses. And so that has what has really slowed us down with our implementation. So at this point, I'd love to invite Beth up here, and we could do our fireside chat and Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, welcome. What an honor and what a wealth of knowledge.
Thank you.
Gosh, I don't even know where to start. It's been quite the journey for you all, and we're about to embark upon that here in Colorado a little bit, so we're kind of tiptoeing around these things. You talked about some of the downfalls and some of the great things. Your existing staff that you have that have gone into the Hospitality Included. What's the retention like? Front of the house, back of the house?
It's a really good question. Our retention levels have not significantly improved yet. They are about the same year over year as they have been in the past. We were hoping to have seen a higher number or percentage of retention. than we have seen, because they're flat. But the reality is that we still think that it requires more time in order to see the long-term benefits. And we also can't isolate the factors for why, what's going on. We do exit surveys with all of our people and interviews. We're not quite sure that we are getting all of the reasons why in a really direct and honest way. But we haven't seen the pop to the retention that we would have liked to have seen.
Flat could actually be better at this point in time, especially with the market the way that it is.
True.
It's interesting as far as you've calculated who you switched over to hospitality included. Mm-hmm. Was there reasoning behind that? Was it the demographic? Was it the style of service?
Yes, yes, and yes. So we chose the modern, the first, because we had a bunch of different concepts within one business. So there are two parts of the modern. There's the bar room, which is a much more casual style of service, much more casual menu, and then we have the dining room, which is much more formal. And we also have huge events that we can host there, and private dining room. So we had three kind of mini businesses within one business. We also felt that given the guests and the menu that we have at the Modern, that there was less price sensitivity than in some of our other businesses. So that was one major kind of consideration. The other, quite honestly, was the leadership team. And the Modern has traditionally had one of our strongest leadership teams. And so we felt like if we're going to bet on a team, we wanted it to be one of our strongest teams. And they raised their hand and they said, we're all in, we want to figure this out. And so with the talent coupled with the passion and enthusiasm and kind of the three businesses to be able to pilot with in one business, we thought, all right, this will be the first one.
Wow. How active was the executive team in implementing this and getting the restaurant through this? Not all of us have that luxury by any means.
Very active, because we each played a very different role. And so the three of us that were most involved, myself from a people perspective, so I was weighing in on career progression and compensation, communication. Those were kind of my three big areas. Training. We have a chief restaurant officer who it was everything guest related, so helping us to think through the scripts for the reservation lines and helping to make sure that the language table side was appropriate. Then we have our chief financial officer who was running all of the models and helping us to analyze the if-then scenarios. And so the three of us, because I couldn't run the models or talk, from the lens of what that guest experience looked like, all three of us needed to be heavily involved in the process.
What is the guest perspective on it? I mean, do you get calls? Are they the same thing? Are people appreciative of it?
We did. We applied some of the same communication techniques with guests that we did with our people. So we hosted a series of town halls. We had an online interactive Q&A. We had an email inbox. We had newsletter communications that went out to them as well. And we hosted guest receptions for our most frequent guests to ask us any questions that they wanted to before going live with it, because we wanted our guests to feel like they were part of the process as well. Early on, guests felt like we were taking something away from them, that they wanted the power to be able to determine what they were going to pay in terms of tips, and they appreciated the opportunity to take care of our people. And we had one guest that said, I've been coming here for 10 years and I've invested so much in building relationships with your team, and that's going to be taken away from me tomorrow. And one of the really amazing things in one of our town halls was that one of our servers stood up and said, I don't take care of you because of the tip. I take care of you because that is my greatest pleasure, is being here and having that opportunity. And the tip at the end feels a little icky, honestly, because I don't want you thinking I'm only doing this for the money. And so that shifted that one guest's perspective. So the beginning was pretty challenging for us to help our guests feel like we weren't taking something away from them. Also educating guests that the $80 bottle of wine is now a $100 bottle of wine has been a massive education process, because people are thinking, I'm going to spend this much for wine, and they're not realizing, oh, in a hospitality included world, tack on additional money for that. That's been our largest challenge. In general, our reviews, though, have been very favorable, and people are commenting on an appreciation of not having to do the mental gymnastics at the end of the meal to figure out what they're going to tip. And people are most of our comments are they feel like the service has improved in lots of cases. And we haven't changed anything really in terms of our training or service. So I think it's just a mental connection that they're somehow making. Also, if anything does happen that's negative, it's always blamed on, well, you took away tipping, so that's why the salmon was undercooked. Okay, even though that would have happened in a tipping world as well.
Exactly.
So.
Do you have guests that refuse it?
We have not had guests refuse it. We have had guests. There are people that come into our restaurants and will look at the menu and say, this is too expensive for me, but not just on the basis of it being hospitality included, as kind of a general rule of thumb. So we haven't really experienced that.
From the server aspect, and I'll open it up because I know there's a ton of questions out here as well, but from the server and back waiter and runner perspective, do you feel like have they seen any decreases or increases in their share, and how long did that really take to work out where it was evened out a little bit, if it did even out?
So in New York, we went from $5 an hour as the tipped minimum wage last year to $7.50. Mm-hmm. And what we saw across the city was an increase of menu prices in order to pay for that increase of $2.50 per hour that was being spent. What we did was we guaranteed our people the same level of compensation for a similar role 12 months prior. Okay. So what that means is we did not take into consideration the $7.50 bump. Mm-hmm. It was what they were earning this time last year was the guarantee. And we said that guarantee existed for 3 months, and it was to make sure that we could, tweak how we were implementing things. But that guarantee we were aspiring towards would be the floor, and we were trying to even exceed that guarantee in terms of their earnings. And with all of our businesses, actually, we were able to tweak it sufficiently so that people were earning more than what that guarantee was at the end of that period. But it was fixed to last year.
I think that's important. Obviously, they always get worried that we're going to take away from them, and the money's going to go down, or it's not going to be the same. And especially when they start splitting a little bit of it off. But. Two
other things that we learned. The first is people did not do the calculation of what their average hourly earnings were. They didn't divide total compensation by the number of hours, so they really didn't know what their hourly earnings were. The other lesson learned, and I don't know if this is unique for us, but people had no idea about taxes.
Wow. I'm not surprised, actually.
So when we said, as an example, the guarantee is $25 an hour, and they got their paycheck, they're like, you told us it was $25 an hour. I said, well, it is. And they're like, who the hell is FICA? Why is he taking all my money?
Because they're actually looking at their checks for once, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, I know that we have a ton of questions because it certainly is a reality for us. I know I could sit here and talk to you probably for another 4 to 5 hours to get more information, but I want to open it up to people out in the audience that have questions.
We said you had enriched benefits for the managers when the conference plane changed. What did that look like?
So we have a training.
Can you repeat the question?
Oh, sure. So the question was, how did we enhance our manager benefits? So we offer a $1,000 stipend for education and development to be used outside of the company. We increased our employee employee dining dollars. We also introduced a parental leave program. And the parental leave program is for not just birth mothers, but fathers and committed domestic partners for the birth or adoption of a child. 4 weeks at 100% pay, and then the next 4 weeks at 60% pay. In addition to PTO, we also enriched PTO for management to always be at the same level of tenure, at least 1 week above hourly employees. The parental leave program, when we were taking a look at that recently, we said, God, it sucks to only offer it to our salaried employees. And yes, we want to be enriching the benefits for our managers, but that just doesn't feel right or fair. So we decided recently to extend it to all of our full-time employees who have been with us for a year, which obviously in the large majority are our hourly people.
Wow.
So we just recently launched that. Well, it won't go into effect until January 1st, but those are some of the things that we did for our managers.
Not asking what all of this is actually costing, but on the bottom line, we've got insurance, we've got all of these benefits that are wonderful, and I think that we would all love to do it, but I mean, and you say that it's a cost of, an investment in the future of the company, which I completely agree, but it is tough to see those percentage points go down on your bottom line.
Yes.
Long-term plan, because nothing's getting less expensive, insurance increasing.
Yeah, I mean, that is the biggest challenge, obviously, is that we are betting on all of the things that we said in a big time way, right? So I recommended the parental leave program, and I couldn't show a business case for it. I have absolutely no idea how much we're going to spend on it, because I can't estimate how many people will get pregnant or become parents or take advantage of something or it was kind of the worst business case that I ever prepared or put together, because I had no data. Everything was made up. That said, the fundamental belief that if we can keep more people in our company, if people are attracted to our company because we offer it, even if they don't take advantage of it, that the retention numbers, because you guys know how expensive it is to find new people, to train them, to invest in them, all of those intangible expenses, if we can start to bump that retention number up, and if we can get better people into our positions, versus kind of just getting a body into a position, then those two things we fundamentally believe will help to strengthen our bottom line. We're just not seeing it yet.
Yeah. In the future, though.
It's all good things.
It is all good things. Ebony?
This will show my trust issues probably, but Union Square is a private company.
Yes.
Correct. And Shake Shack is public?
Correct.
So when you're sharing your financial information with employees, are you having them sign any kind of confidentiality agreements?
They sign NDAs when they join the company. So, but we do our best to remind them of the confidentiality, but we don't overemphasize it either.
Yeah, I just feel like it would go hand in hand, so I was wondering how you handled that.
Yeah, and we also think about what does happen if that information does get leaked. And what we have been thinking about is, for the one person that could do it, do we want to penalize everyone else with that education or that opportunity for education?
Right.
And we have been fortunate that that hasn't been leaked, but if it does, then we have to act very swiftly and firmly, and not to use that person as an example, but to say, you know what, we extend trust, but that isn't an ever-flowing well of trust if you violate it.
Right. If you had one thing you could do, is there one thing you would do differently, having gone this far?
That's a good one thing differently. I mean, I have a long list.
Top 10.
I would have started sooner. The year-long process and all of some of these ideas were honestly like batshit crazy ideas that we analyzed and piloted, that we lost a year. And I look back on that and I think early on we saw the writing on the wall, and I think we thought, okay, if we could just come up with other surely there's an idea out there that we can implement. And for me personally, if I would have had the courage to have named that earlier and had the faith and the confidence in Danny and our team to say, of course, we'll do the right thing, then maybe we wouldn't have lost that year.
I also want to say thank you for being so brave, because I think you're opening up the industry. You're doing something that maybe a lot of people have thought about, and they get to watch you do it. So thank you.
Thank you.
Hopefully eliminate some of our costly mistakes.
Yeah.
Speaking of the culture that you've created in the restaurant, what's changed between the front of the house and the back of the house?
Well, it's interesting because the people who were complaining the most about back of house compensation were our front of house team members. They were the ones who felt like crap at the end of the night when they were high-fiving for an amazing service or a really busy night, and they were watching their back of house team members get crushed in the kitchen and not having any of the financial upside. So they were the ones that were advocating really strongly for increased compensation. The reality, though, is that the compensation has not shifted greatly the teamwork or the dynamic that we're experiencing. There was always a really positive, in general, a really positive relationship between both sides, and that remains positive, but I wouldn't say it's any better as a result of the compensation, or worse.
What kind of compensation is going to the back of the house from that hospitality included?
So that we increased the floor and then increased the wages for all of the positions above the floor. And in one of our restaurants, we introduced a revenue share program for back of house as well. What we are finding, though, is that our back of house colleagues would rather have fixed compensation rather than variable, and they don't fully understand the way that how the program works, and so they're saying, just give me an extra 50 cents an hour. Like, why does it have to be tied to that? Because their brains are trained in a very different way versus front of house that wants that kind of financial upside and that variability.
Erin, can you tell us how you came to the conclusion to do hospitality included rather than a service charge? And then my second question is, how different will it be when this hits Blue Smoke than it did at the Modern? Oh,
you noticed that Blue Smoke was not one of the ones that we we converted. So the first question about the service charge, we found out that the Department of Consumer Affairs has mandated that adding a service charge in a restaurant is illegal, and that there's a $500 fine per transaction.
New York Department of Labor?
No.
Federal?
The Department of Consumer Affairs. That said, they have not chosen to go after. I don't think they've gone after anyone yet. But we were concerned. We were concerned that if we did that they would use us as an example. So it is something that's on the books that our attorneys advised us against doing, because if we were to be fined, that was like tens of millions of dollars that we would have had to have paid.
Blue Smoke versus the Modern.
Oh, right, Blue Smoke. Thank you. Honestly, that's one of our challenges moving forward, is because we have the price sensitivity of our guests at Blue Smoke is something that we have not yet experienced in the other businesses that we have converted, and we want to make sure. And Blue Smoke also has catering and takeout, and we want to make sure that we have two different Blue Smokes, and they have two slightly different menus, and so that concept is a lot more complicated. We also have private events that we do, and so we want to make sure that we are taking care of all of those other details before going live with that, but that will be one of our more challenging ones, not just for the complexity of the business itself, but because of the profile of our guests and their price sensitivity.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Is there a formula for calculating the increased menu pricing?
So the question was, is there a formula for calculating the increased menu pricing? We were targeting 22% overall for top line sales. So again, not each menu item going up 20-some%, but overall trying to achieve that. One other thing that we learned, the best way for us to do this without increasing our menu prices so high is to crush it with our PDRs. Because that is one of the best ways that we can drive revenue into the business, and it also helps tremendously with our food costs as well. So the businesses that have the most active PDRs don't have to have as high of menu pricing.
I have a question about the revenue sharing.
Where am I looking? Oh, hi.
Hi. So you are starting the servers at $11 to $15 an hour, the front of house staff.
Yes.
About what percentage of increase over that is this revenue sharing giving them weekly?
So depending on the business, it could be the total, and I'm saying average, right, would be between $25 and $32 total an hour, of which the 11 to 15 is the fixed and the rest is the variable. The percentage changes by business, and it's a function of the overall revenue as well as where we set the fixed, whether it's 11 or 15. So it's a higher percentage with the $11 an hour, and it's a lower percentage with the $15 an hour.
Hi, Erin. I have a question. You talked about in your family values, integrity, I think, was listed as #1. And I've noticed on a number of your slides that transparency has been a key theme. You've also made these rapid announcements between hospitality included, which we were all like excited and in awe about, and then all of a sudden there's like a new announcement, parental leave. More great news coming out of Union Square Hospitality to inspire us. I'm curious if you might be able to give us a sneak preview of anything that might be coming next and down the road.
We're going to digest what we've already consumed. That's what we're going to do. Because we also have Union Square Cafe opening up in a couple of weeks, and that opening has been quite delayed. And so we want to make sure that we stick the landing with the opening of Union Square Cafe, and that we actually continue the methodical and deliberate rollout, including the complexity of Blue Smoke. We also have Porchlight, which is a bar, which serves great food, but it's a bar, right? So we need to tackle that one too. And we have to see how this parental leave new program goes and what we're gonna spend and invest in that program. So I don't think you're gonna see a whole lot from us in terms of new things, because we have to land the planes that we've already taken off.
Hi. Thanks for giving us all this insight. I actually work for a company that services restaurants, so I don't actually work at the restaurant, but we recently did a survey of restaurant professionals around this topic. And even when we explained the idea of raising the wage and kind of bringing in the tipping compensation into that, the overwhelming response was, no, I hate it. And I'm wondering, what do you think is at the core of that? It was almost as if they didn't read the actual part about, hey, we're going to increase your wage, you know, the concept of that. It just skipped right to, you are affecting my livelihood. That would be the worst possible thing that could happen to me. So what do you think is the core fear there that is really causing people to just skip over the whole education piece?
Yeah, I think your hypothesis is correct that people didn't read it. The videos that you saw, that is the encapsulation of probably internally the number of documents that we have created to explain the complexity of the issue that we tried to synthesize into some key kind of pithy messages. It's meaty and it's complex and people don't understand it, and we don't want to overwhelm them with too much information. But that's also why in our approach, focusing on each human being as an individual, in addition to helping the collective understand why we're doing things, was so vitally important. Because, you know, if you sent out an email to say, effective tomorrow, your compensation is going to change, that's going to feel like it's happening to someone and not for them, even if it's a benefit for them. And so helping people to understand that, because their first reaction is likely going to be, it's going to be decreased, or you're trying to screw me over, or it's not a good thing. And most of us could probably also agree that change is hard. Even if it's a good change, it's a hard thing. And so making sure that those conversations are live and active has been what's worked for us.
Who else in New York is making these changes? You guys are the pioneers, obviously, and well respected, and I think we've all kind of sat back and watched to see how the whole progress was going to happen. Do you see this becoming, you know, obviously restaurant-wide? I mean,
yeah, we've seen a couple of other restaurant groups start to experiment with it, but I believe that most, and we know this from our conversations with our industry peers, we also hosted a series of industry town halls as well, yes, to help our colleagues to understand what we're doing and to go through kind of something similar like we did here, which is don't make the same mistakes we made, make new mistakes going through this process. What we have learned is that they are waiting to see how the financials are impacted, and they're looking for our business case, and the minute that we can show the financial positive impact is when they will embrace this, and we're waiting for that too. So, but as of January 1st, the game changes pretty significantly with the increases, because when minimum wage goes up to $11 an hour, up from $9, and with the Department of Labor salary increases for exempt employees, plus tipped minimum wage going up, our menu prices are going to go up. In general, just to remain neutral, it could be upwards of 40%. And if you're tipping on top of that, right? I mean, just running the just the pure math, right? If you're tipping on top of that, that's going to, I think that alone might force people to say, I have to look at some, even if they haven't seen the financials come from us. And when we can show the case, we absolutely will.
Right.
But
one of the movements we're starting to hear around the country is this one of predictive scheduling. We've seen it, you know, they're looking at it in Washington, D.C., but they've already implemented, I understand, in Seattle and San Francisco. Assuming that you are probably going to see that in New York at some point, have you talked about that? And if so, how are you thinking about dealing with it?
We have not really talked about it. It's been something that we have, that we've obviously heard about, but not something that we've actively tried to think through what we would do if that happened to us. And you're right, it likely will, but we just have not made that a priority in terms of our conversations internally.